44 minutes after the hour, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, whether you're in Hawaii or up in New York, down in Florida, or out in Alaska. Thank you for listening today. Earlier today, I talked with Kelly Ayotte. She is running for Senate in New Hampshire. Now out to the West Coast, where there is going to be quite a surprise, I think, on November 3rd. Jim Huffman is a law school professor. He's also a husband, a father, and a constitutional expert. He is running against Ron Wyden for the United States Senate seat that until recently everyone thought was going to stay Wyden's easily. Jim Huffman, welcome to the program. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be on your program.
Well, like you, I teach law at Chapman Law School. You teach at Lewis and Clark Law School. So I'm wondering, how does a law professor and former dean come to run for senator?
Well, I think it's the product of frustration more than anything else. I just kept watching what was going on in Washington, D.C., and decided it was time to get out of the academy and into the real world of politics and see if I couldn't make a difference. Now,
Jim, how surprised are your friends on the faculty, your colleagues of 30 years of teaching, and your students?
I think they're very surprised. And I think still a lot of my colleagues don't believe I've actually done this. And, of course, if you know law schools, although Chapman's a little different than most, I'm not going to get a lot of support from my law school faculty colleagues.
Yeah, we're slightly less left-wing than most law schools. But most of us are friendly. I assume they're like friendly, oh, go out and have a good time, Jim, and we'll see you here in the winter. They don't think you can win, though.
Absolutely. They all expect me back in January.
But, you know, Jim, this year, Jim Huffman, Ron Wyden just came out against Obamacare. You must have him very worried.
Yeah, and it is interesting that he's done that because he was one of the 60 votes they needed to pass that thing. And he, in his own health care bill that he proposed in 2007, he had an individual mandate, and now he's looking for an exemption for the state of Oregon.
Yeah. So tell me, has he agreed to debates with you yet?
We haven't got anything finalized. I certainly hope and assume that he will, but nothing's been settled yet.
You know, when I was up in Corvallis for the Lincoln Day dinner with Chris Dudley and a bunch of other great Republicans in February, I didn't get a chance to meet you, Jim, but I picked up the idea that this may be a very unusual year in Oregon politics, given the winds that are blowing. What do you think?
I think it will be. You know, it's been a long dry spell for Republicans in this state. And is as much the fault of the Republicans as it is of anybody else. I think we've shot ourselves in the foot repeatedly, but we've got some great candidates, including Chris Dudley. We've got some good congressional candidates. We've got great legislative candidates, a challenger in every seat that's open in the state. And I think it is going to be a good year for Republicans, and the mood in the state is very favorable. With all the polling data evidences that Oregon's not much different than the rest of the nation in terms of their approval of Obama, their approval of health care. All of those things are upside down for the Democrats.
I'm talking with Jim Huffman, Republican nominee for United States Senate in the great state of Oregon. In the Mark Hatfield tradition, I'm wondering, though, Jim, you've got this screwy voting system up there. When does voting begin?
Well, the ballots come out, or drop, as we say, 2 weeks before November 2nd. And then the voters can return them whenever they want. In the last few cycles, about 50% of the votes come in that first 10 days, and the other 50% come in over the last weekend up to the Tuesday of the election. So it makes running a campaign much more difficult because you can't target for a particular date.
So people start voting there en masse in about 6 weeks?
That's right. That's right. So that means that we have to have a campaign that's geared up to influence those people who do cast their ballots early on, but keep the message going right up to November 2nd. So it increased costs and the challenge of getting that message out.
Obviously, we got to raise you some money. I've linked HuffmanForSenate.com over at my website, HughHewitt.com, and people listening right now are encouraged. $25, $50, $100, Jim. I'm sure it goes a long way, and I'm sure Ron Wyden's got all the big labor money behind him.
Yeah, absolutely he does. It'll make a huge difference. Those small contributions add up, and we need to fund our television and our radio and our direct mail. So any help we get from any place in the country, I think we're all in this thing together, and there's a common cause here of Republicans can really take over the Senate, and that could make a huge difference nationwide.
I know if we can extend the map to include your race, all of a sudden the Democrats are sweating bullets, even though they got a 9-vote margin right now in the United States Senate. If Oregon is in play, and looking at the polls, I'd have to say it is. Is that what you're seeing?
I think so. Our internal polling suggests that if we get our message out, and that's why the money's important, we'll be able to win. And just imagine that. We could win 3 Republican seats on the West Coast, or the left coast, as they sometimes say. And that would be huge. So, Oregon could be the 50th vote for the Republican majority.
All right, Dino Rossi to your north, Carly Fiorina to your south, and now Jim Huffman in the middle. Now, in terms of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, are they giving you some help?
They are giving us good in-kind help. I'm going to be visiting with them again in 2 more weeks. They're helping us with media. They're helping us with background research. And they're helping us with some PAC fundraising we'll be doing. So, we're getting some help, and we expect we're going to get more as we close the gap in the polling numbers.
Now, what's coming out of an academic life, even though you were the dean, which means you're not an academic, you're managing a big operation. What's the most interesting aspect of getting into, brass-knuckled electoral politics?
Well, as you know, there's a certain amount of politics in law schools. It's of a different variety, but I've had to learn how to get along with a lot of people who politically I disagree with, and I think I was very successful at that. I was dean for 13 years, and I think the most interesting part of it for me has been an opportunity to take a lot of the academic stuff that I've worked on for 37 years and really try to apply it in the real world to real world problems, and I think that gives me a great leg up on a lot of first-time candidates.
Last question, Jim Huffman. What do you make of the individual mandate's constitutionality?
Well, I've taught constitutional law 37 years. I've taught the Commerce Clause over and over and over again, and I believe that there's a better than fair argument that provision is unconstitutional. I don't think there's any other federal law that has ever gone as far as to mandate participation in interstate commerce. This is not a regulation of interstate commerce. It's a mandate that individuals participate. So I think that it's that we have a good shot at winning this thing. The only thing that embarrasses me about this is that the only state that has come out in favor of the government's position on this is the state of Oregon.
Wow.
Our Attorney General has filed an amicus brief on behalf of the Obama administration. So.
Another reason to get some help to Jim Huffman. That tells you about Oregon. But it is winnable. I wouldn't have Jim on if it wasn't. Jim Huffman is the candidate to beat Ron Wyden in Oregon. HuffmanForSenate.com. HuffmanFor Senate.com. Jim, good to talk with you. We'll check back in again over this Labor Day weekend. Send him some help, America.